The moment Clara Bennett spun that leather chair around and found Adrian Hale standing there, arms crossed, eyes cold as winter steel, she knew her life was about to change forever. The billionaire CEO had heard every word of her mocking phone call, every joke, every insult, every careless truth about how terrifying he seemed. Most people would have been fired on the spot, but Adrian Hale didn't fire her. He did something far more dangerous. He pulled her into his world, and neither of them would ever be the same again. If you want to see how this impossible love story unfolds, stick around until the end and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The first time Clara Bennett saw Adrian Hale in person, she didn't actually see him at all. She was sitting in his chair. It was a Thursday afternoon in late September, and Clara was having the kind of day that made her question every life choice that had led her to this moment. Her feet hurt from cheap shoes that were falling apart. Her head throbbed from skipping lunch because she'd given her last $20 to her grandmother's pharmacy. And now she was standing outside the most intimidating office door in all of Manhattan, holding a manila envelope that apparently contained documents important enough to require hand delivery to the 32nd floor. The executive assistant who'd sent her up, a woman named Patricia with perfect nails and a voice like crushed ice, had assured Clara that Mr. Hale was in a meeting across town. "Just leave the files on his desk," Patricia had said, barely looking up from her computer. "Don't touch anything else." Clara had nodded, grateful she wouldn't have to face the legendary Adrian Hale. She'd heard enough stories. Everyone had. The youngest billionaire in New York, the CEO, who'd rebuilt his father's struggling company into an empire before he turned 30. The widower who never smiled, never dated seriously, and apparently never showed a single human emotion in public. The man was a ghost in an expensive suit. So when Clara pushed open the door to his office and found it empty, she felt a wave of relief so strong it made her slightly dizzy. The office was ridiculous, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, furniture that probably cost more than her yearly salary. Everything was steel and glass and sharp edges, like the room itself was designed to intimidate. Clara dropped the envelope on the massive desk and turned to leave. Then she stopped. Her phone was buzzing. Mara, her best friend since high school, the only person who could make her laugh on days like this. Clara glanced at the empty office, then at the leather chair behind the desk. It was just sitting there. Enormous, probably ergonomic, definitely more comfortable than anything she'd ever owned. 1 minute, she told herself, just 1 minute to rest her aching feet. She sat down and answered the phone. "Please tell me you're done for the day," Mara's voice came through, warm and familiar. "Because I'm at Joey's, and they have $2 beer until 6. Clara laughed, spinning the chair slightly. "I wish I just got sent upstairs to deliver something to Adrian Hale's office." "Wait, the Adrian Hale? Billionaire iceberg Adrian Hale?" "That's the one." Clara leaned back in the chair, and okay, it was incredibly comfortable. "Patricia said he's in a meeting, so I just dropped off the files. But Mara, you should see this office. It's like a museum for people with no personality. Everything's gray and sharp, and is he really as scary as everyone says?" Clara snorted. I haven't actually met him, but based on this office? Yeah, probably. I mean, who lives like this? There's not a single personal item anywhere. No photos, no plants, nothing. It's like a robot works here. Maybe he is a robot, a really hot robot. I saw his picture in Forbes last month. Please, the man's probably never smiled in his entire life. Can you imagine dating someone like that? "Hello, Clara, would you like to discuss quarterly earnings over dinner?" She deepened her voice mockingly. "I have scheduled exactly 12 minutes for emotional intimacy." Mara was laughing now. "Stop! I'm dying! I'm serious!" Men like Adrian Hale don't have relationships. They have acquisitions. Everything's a transaction. I bet he's never done a spontaneous thing in his ahem. The voice came from behind her, deep, cold. Definitely not robotic, but somehow worse. Clara's entire body went rigid. "No," she thought. "No, no, no." She spun the chair around. Adrian Hale was standing 6 feet away, perfectly still, watching her with eyes that could freeze fire. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him like a threat. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, like he'd been running his hand through it, and his expression was completely, utterly blank. Clara's phone slipped from her hand and clattered onto his desk. "Mr. Hale," she stammered, jumping to her feet so fast she nearly tripped. I I was just Patricia said you were in a meeting. The meeting ended early. His voice was quiet, controlled, and absolutely terrifying in its calmness. I was just leaving the files and my friend called and Clara could feel her face burning. I'm so sorry. That was completely inappropriate. I'll go. Right now. I'm going. She moved toward the door, but his voice stopped her. Miss Bennett. She froze. He knew her name. Of course he knew her name. He probably knew everything. Clara turned slowly. Yes, sir? Adrian walked past her to his desk, picked up the manila envelope, and examined it briefly. When he looked back at her, his expression hadn't changed at all. You'll be joining the Lisbon team, he said simply. Clara blinked. I'm sorry, what? The investment project in Portugal. We're finalizing a partnership with European investors. The team leaves Monday morning. He set the envelope down, straightening it so it aligned perfectly with the edge of his desk. Patricia will send you the details. But I'm just an assistant. I don't work on international projects. I file paperwork, and you speak Portuguese according to your employee file. Clara's mouth opened, then closed. I mean, yes, but that's just because my grandmother, Monday morning, 7 a.m. Don't be late. He sat down in his chair, the same chair she'd been sitting in moments ago, and turned toward his computer, effectively dismissing her. Clara stood there, stunned, trying to process what had just happened. She'd insulted him to his face. Well, technically to his back, but he'd heard every word. And instead of firing her, he was sending her to Lisbon? Mr. Hale, I really think there's been some mistake. Miss Bennett. He didn't look up from his screen. You have 30 seconds to leave my office before I reconsider this assignment entirely. I suggest you use them. Clara grabbed her phone and practically ran for the door. 48 hours later, Clara still had no idea what had happened. She sat at her tiny kitchen table in Queens, staring at the email Patricia had sent. Flight information, hotel details, a schedule packed with meetings she didn't understand. Her official title for the trip was Project Assistant, which meant exactly nothing. He's going to destroy you, Mara said from the couch, eating Clara's leftover Chinese food. You know that, right? This is some kind of revenge plot. You insulted a billionaire, and now he's going to make your life hell. Thanks for the support, Clara muttered. I'm serious. Men like Adrian Hale don't forgive. They punish. Clara's grandmother, Rosa, shuffled into the kitchen with her walker, moving slowly but stubbornly, refusing help, as always. At 78, she was tiny, tough, and completely unimpressed by wealth. Bobajam, Rosa said in Portuguese, waving her hand dismissively. Nonsense. If he wanted to punish her, he would have fired her already. Then why is he doing this? Clara asked. Rosa sat down carefully, her dark eyes sharp despite her age. Maybe he's curious. Curious about what? About the girl brave enough to mock him in his own office. Rosa smiled slightly. Most people are afraid of powerful men. You weren't. I didn't know he was there. Doesn't matter. You said what you thought. That's rare. Rosa reached across the table and patted Clara's hand. Go to Lisbon. Do your job. See what happens. What if I mess up? What if I embarrass myself in front of investors? Then you'll survive, just like you've survived everything else. Rosa's voice was firm. You're stronger than you think, querida. Mara looked up from the couch. Plus, if it goes badly, you can always quit and move to Portugal permanently. I hear Lisbon's beautiful. Not helping, Mara. Monday morning came too fast. Clara arrived at the private aviation terminal at 6:45 a.m., exhausted and terrified, carrying a suitcase she'd borrowed from Mara and wearing the only professional dress she owned that didn't have a coffee stain. The terminal was nothing like the regular airport. Everything was leather and marble and quiet wealth. A woman in a crisp uniform checked her ID and directed her to a lounge where the rest of the team was apparently waiting. Clara pushed through the glass doors and stopped. There were maybe 8 people in the room, all of them looking aggressively competent. Tailored suits, leather briefcases, the kind of confidence that came from expensive educations and family connections. And in the center of it all, standing by the window with a coffee in his hand, was Adrian Hale. He looked exactly the same as he had in his office, perfectly composed, impossibly distant. He was talking to an older man in a navy suit, his voice too low for Clara to hear. You must be Clara. She turned to find a woman in her 40s extending a hand. Professional smile, sharp eyes, platinum blonde hair pulled back severely. I'm Vanessa Chen, lead strategist on this project. Her handshake was brief and efficient. Mr. Hale mentioned you'd be joining us. Right, yes. Hi. Clara tried to match Vanessa's confidence and failed miserably. Your role will be supporting document preparation and translation services. Portuguese, correct? Yes, my grandmother. Perfect. Stay close during meetings and be ready to clarify any language discrepancies. Vanessa glanced at her watch. We board in 10 minutes. Coffee's over there if you need it. She walked away before Clara could respond. Clara moved toward the coffee station, trying to make herself invisible. She poured a cup with shaking hands, added too much cream, and turned around, and nearly collided with Adrian Hale. He stepped back smoothly, not spilling a drop of his own coffee. Miss Bennett? Mr. Hale. Clara's voice came out higher than intended. Sorry I didn't see you, Yara. Are you prepared for the trip? It wasn't really a question, it was a test. Yes, sir. I reviewed all the materials Patricia sent. Good. He paused, and for just a second, something flickered across his face. The investors we're meeting are traditional, conservative. They'll be watching everything. Clara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Don't try to impress them, Adrian continued. Just do your job, translate accurately, take notes, stay professional. I can do that. His eyes, gray, she realized, not blue, studied her for a moment. Can you? It should have sounded condescending, but it didn't. It sounded genuine, like he actually wasn't sure. Yes, Clara said, more firmly this time. I can. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite approval, but close. We'll see, he said quietly, and walked away. The flight to Lisbon was 7 hours of carefully controlled panic. Clara had never been on a private jet before. She'd barely been on any plane before. And this wasn't just a plane. It was a flying luxury hotel with leather seats that reclined into beds, and a flight attendant who kept offering her food she was too nervous to eat. She sat near the back, away from the main group, trying to review her notes. But her mind kept drifting to Adrian, who sat at the front with Vanessa and 2 other executives, discussing things Clara didn't understand. He hadn't looked at her once since boarding. Halfway through the flight, Clara gave up on the notes and stared out the window at the ocean below. She thought about her grandmother, alone in their apartment, about the medical bills stacking up, about how completely out of her depth she was. First time flying private? Clara jumped. A man had slid into the seat across from her, younger than the other executives, maybe early 30s, with an easy smile and expensive glasses. That obvious? Clara asked. Little bit. He extended his hand. Daniel Park. I'm on the legal team. Clara Bennett. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing here. Daniel laughed. Join the club. Adrian keeps his cards close. Half the time, I don't know why he makes the decisions he makes. He leaned back, studying her curiously. But he doesn't bring people on international projects without a reason. Maybe he just needed a translator. We have translators, professional ones who've worked with the company for years. Daniel's smile widened. So, no, that's not it. Clara felt her stomach tighten. Then what do you think it is? Daniel glanced toward the front of the plane, where Adrian was reading something on his tablet, his face unreadable as always. I think, Daniel said slowly, Adrian Hale saw something in you that interested him. And when Adrian gets interested in something, he doesn't let it go. Before Clara could respond, the seatbelt sign chimed on. The pilot's voice came through the speakers, announcing their descent into Lisbon. Clara looked out the window and saw the city spreading below, terracotta roofs, winding streets, the Tagus River gleaming in the afternoon sun. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. And Clara Bennett, the girl from Queens who could barely afford rent, was about to pretend she belonged in a world of billionaires and international deals. She wasn't sure which scared her more, the possibility of failing or the way Adrian Hale had looked at her right before he walked away, like he was waiting to see if she'd prove him right or prove him wrong. Iquique. The hotel was ridiculous. Clara had seen fancy hotels in movies, but this was something else entirely. The lobby had marble columns, crystal chandeliers, and staff who moved like dancers, anticipating needs before guests even spoke. Her room was on the 12th floor. A suite, apparently, though she'd never stayed anywhere nice enough to know the difference. It had a king-sized bed, a bathroom with a tub big enough to swim in, and a balcony overlooking the river. Clara dropped her borrowed suitcase on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed, fighting the urge to cry. This wasn't her life. This was someone else's life, and she was just borrowing it for a few days before everything went back to normal. Back to her cramped apartment in Queens, back to medical bills and cheap shoes and skipping lunch. Her phone buzzed, a text from Mara. "How's Portugal? Are you dead yet?" Clara smiled despite herself and typed back, "Not dead, just very confused." Another buzz. This one from Patricia. "Dinner meeting tonight at 8 p.m. Business formal. Car picks you up at 7:45. Address below. Business formal." Clara looked at her suitcase and wanted to scream. She'd packed exactly 2 dresses, and neither of them were appropriate for dinner with international investors. She grabbed her phone and called the only person who might understand. "Vovo," she said when her grandmother answered. "I think I made a terrible mistake. Ugh." An hour later, Clara stood in front of the hotel mirror, trying to make her discount dress look expensive. It wasn't working. The fabric was fine. The cut was fine. But next to the kind of wealth she'd be sitting across from tonight, fine wasn't going to cut it. She'd done what she could, borrowed a necklace from Mara before leaving, put her hair up in a way that looked elegant if you didn't look too close, and wore the one pair of heels she owned that didn't pinch. It would have to be enough. At exactly 7:45, her phone buzzed. The car was waiting. Clara took one last look in the mirror, grabbed her small purse, and headed downstairs, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The car was a sleek black Mercedes with a driver who opened her door without a word. Clara slid into the back seat and tried not to think about how much this single car ride probably cost. They drove through Lisbon as the sun set, golden light spilling across the hills and narrow streets. It was stunning. Under any other circumstances, Clara would have been taking pictures, soaking it all in. Instead, she was mentally rehearsing Portuguese phrases and praying she wouldn't humiliate herself. The restaurant was tucked into an old building in the Alfama district, all stone walls and intimate lighting. The kind of place that didn't have prices on the menu because if you had to ask, you didn't belong there. Clara stepped out of the car and immediately felt underdressed. A hostess led her through the main dining room to a private area in the back, sectioned off by velvet curtains. Clara could hear voices, smooth, confident, speaking a mix of English and Portuguese. She pushed through the curtain. The room went quiet. 7 people sat around an elegant table, wine glasses glinting in candlelight. Vanessa was there, along with Daniel and 2 executives Clara didn't recognize. Across from them sat 3 people she assumed were the Portuguese investors, older, impeccably dressed, assessing her with the kind of casual scrutiny that came from old money. And at the head of the table, watching her with those impossible gray eyes, was Adrian Hale. He stood as she entered. The other men followed his lead. "Miss Bennett," Adrian said, his voice giving nothing away. "You're right on time." He gestured to the empty seat beside him. Clara forced herself to walk normally, to sit down gracefully, to smile politely as introductions were made. The investors' names blurred together, João something, Maria something else. A man named Carlos who looked at her like he was trying to solve a puzzle. A waiter appeared, pouring wine Clara was too nervous to drink. "So," Carlos said in accented English, leaning forward slightly, "Miss Bennett, Mr. Hale tells us you will be assisting with translation during our negotiations." "Yes, sir," Clara said, keeping her voice steady. "I'm fluent in Portuguese." "Where did you learn?" Maria asked, her tone friendly but probing. "From my grandmother. She immigrated from Brazil 40 years ago." "Ah, Brazilian Portuguese," Carlos nodded. "Different from ours, but beautiful nonetheless." The conversation shifted to business. Numbers and projections Clara barely followed. She took notes when appropriate, translated a few technical terms, and tried to blend into the background. But she could feel Adrian beside her, a constant presence. He barely spoke during dinner, letting Vanessa lead most of the discussion. But when he did speak, everyone listened. There was power in his silence, in the way he waited before responding, in the way his slightest gesture, a nod, a raised eyebrow, could shift the entire tone of the conversation. It was fascinating and unsettling in equal measure. Halfway through the main course, João said something in rapid Portuguese to Maria, too quick for the others to catch. But Clara heard it. He was questioning the financial projections Vanessa had presented, suggesting the numbers were too optimistic. Not loudly, not confrontationally, just a quiet aside that could sink the entire deal if left unaddressed. Clara glanced at Adrian. He was cutting his fish, apparently unconcerned, but she saw the tension in his jaw. He'd heard it too. Without thinking, Clara leaned slightly toward João and spoke in Portuguese, her voice low and respectful. Senor João, if I may, the projections account for market volatility over 18 months, not 12. The extended timeline might address your concerns about optimism. João looked at her, surprised. Then he smiled. You have a good ear, Miss Bennet. My grandmother taught me that listening is more important than speaking. A wise woman. João turned to Adrian. Your team is well chosen, Mr. Hale. Adrian's expression didn't change, but Clara felt something shift in the air between them. The rest of dinner passed more smoothly. By the time dessert arrived, the investors seemed genuinely pleased. Contracts would be reviewed. Meetings would continue. The deal was still alive. As the group began to disperse, exchanging business cards and handshakes, Adrian touched Clara's elbow lightly. A word, he said quietly. They stepped out onto a small terrace overlooking the Alfama district. The city lights spread below them like scattered stars. The air was warm, carrying the scent of grilled fish and old stone. Clara waited for him to speak, her heart still racing from the dinner. That was well done, Adrian said finally. I just translated. You saved the deal. He turned to face her fully. João was about to walk away. You heard what he said and addressed it before it became a problem. Clara shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. Anyone would have done the same. No, Adrian said softly. They wouldn't have. The way he was looking at her made Clara's breath catch. Not cold anymore, not distant, something else entirely. Why did you really bring me here? She asked before she could stop herself. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. The sounds of the restaurant faded behind them, leaving just the distant hum of the city. Because, he said finally, you spoke to me like I was human, not a billionaire, not a CEO, just a person. He paused. No one's done that in a very long time. Clara's throat felt tight. I didn't mean to insult you. I know. A ghost of something, amusement, maybe, crossed his face. That's what made it honest. Before she could respond, Vanessa appeared in the doorway. Adrian, the car's ready. The moment broke. Adrian stepped back, his expression sliding back into professional neutrality. We have meetings tomorrow starting at 9. Get some rest, Miss Bennet. He walked past her, leaving Clara alone on the terrace with the lights of Lisbon spread below and the distinct feeling that something had just shifted between them. Something neither of them was ready to name. Look. Back at the hotel, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in the enormous bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the evening. The way Adrian had looked at her on the terrace, the quietness in his voice, the almost vulnerability. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from an unknown number. Thank you for tonight. A.H. Clara stared at the message, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. She shouldn't respond. It was late. It was unprofessional. It was, her fingers moved before her brain could catch up. Just doing my job. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, you did more than that. Clara bit her lip, suddenly very aware that she was alone in a hotel room in a foreign city, texting her billionaire boss at midnight. This was dangerous. This was stupid. She put the phone down and closed her eyes, trying to sleep. But all she could see was Adrian Hale standing on that terrace, looking at her like she was the first real thing he'd seen in years. And God help her, she wanted to know what happened next. The next morning arrived with golden light streaming through the hotel windows, and Clara's phone buzzing with meeting reminders she wasn't ready for. She'd barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Adrian on that terrace, heard his voice saying, "You spoke to me like I was human," felt the weight of those gray eyes studying her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. The smart thing would be to forget it. Stay professional. Remember that he was Adrian Hale, billionaire, CEO, completely out of her league in every possible way. And she was just Clara Bennet from Queens, temporarily playing a role in a world that would never really accept her. But Clara had never been particularly good at doing the smart thing. She showered, dressed in her second business outfit, a navy skirt and white blouse that had looked fine in Queens but felt inadequate here. and headed downstairs for the breakfast meeting Vanessa had scheduled. The hotel restaurant was all crisp white linens and fresh flowers, filled with the kind of people who looked like they'd never worried about money in their entire lives. Clara grabbed a croissant and coffee and found the team gathered at a large corner table. Adrian was already there, of course. He probably hadn't slept either, but you'd never know it from looking at him. Perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, reading something on his phone with the same focused intensity he brought to everything. He glanced up as she approached, and for just a second, so brief she might have imagined it, something flickered in his expression. Then it was gone. "Miss Bennet," he said, his voice professionally neutral. "Sleep well?" "Well enough," Clara lied, sliding into the empty chair across from him. Vanessa launched into the day's agenda without preamble. 2 meetings with the investors, a site visit to a potential property, dinner with local business leaders. Clara took notes, trying to ignore the way Adrian's presence seemed to fill the entire table even when he wasn't speaking. Daniel leaned over, whispering, "You made quite an impression last night. Joao specifically asked if you'd be at today's meetings. I just translated a few things. You did more than that, and you know it." Daniel grinned. "Vanessa's been with the company for 8 years, and I've never seen Adrian compliment anyone the way he complimented you in the car ride back." Clara's head snapped up. "He what?" But Daniel was already standing, following the others toward the exit. Clara grabbed her bag and hurried after them, her mind spinning. The first meeting was in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the Tagus River. João, Maria, and Carlos were already there, along with 2 lawyers and an accountant whose expression suggested he trusted absolutely no one. Adrian took the lead this time, and Clara watched him transform. Not warmer, exactly, but sharper. Every word precise, every gesture calculated. He spoke about market projections and risk assessment with the kind of confidence that made you believe he could see the future. It was impressive. It was also exhausting to witness. Halfway through, Carlos asked a question in Portuguese about zoning regulations, and before the translator could respond, Clara jumped in. The current zoning allows mixed-use development, but there's pending legislation that could restrict foreign investment in historic districts. It's scheduled for a vote next month. Carlos raised an eyebrow. "You follow Portuguese politics, Miss Bennet?" "I did some research last night." Clara pulled up the article on her phone. "It seemed relevant." Maria smiled. "Thorough and prepared. I like her, Adrian." Adrian's expression didn't change, but Clara saw his hand tighten slightly around his pen. The meeting stretched past lunch. They ordered food in, beautiful little pastries Clara was too nervous to eat, and kept going. Numbers, contracts, clauses that needed revision. The lawyers argued in technical language that made Clara's head hurt. Finally, around 3 in the afternoon, João stood and extended his hand to Adrian. "I think we have an agreement in principle," he said. My team will draft the preliminary contracts tonight." Handshakes all around, smiles that seemed genuine. Vanessa practically glowed with professional satisfaction. As everyone filed out, Adrian touched Clara's arm lightly. "Walk with me," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. They left the building and headed toward the river, Adrian setting a slow pace that suggested he wasn't in any hurry to get anywhere. He'd loosened his tie slightly, and for the first time all day, he looked almost human. "You researched Portuguese zoning legislation," he said after a moment. "It seemed important." "It was." He paused. "Most people in your position would have just shown up and done what they were told. You went beyond that." Clara shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I didn't want to mess up." "You didn't." Adrian stopped walking and turned to face her. They were standing near the river now, tourist boats drifting past, the afternoon sun warm on the stone embankment. "Why do you do that?" "Do what?" "Deflect. Every time someone acknowledges you did something well, you minimize it." Clara felt her defenses rise. "I'm not deflecting. I'm just being honest." "No, you're protecting yourself." His voice was quiet but firm. "You're smart enough to know you did good work yesterday and today. But you won't admit it because admitting it means accepting that you belong here. And you don't think you do." The words hit harder than they should have. "I don't belong here," Clara said, more sharply than she intended. "Let's not pretend otherwise. You brought me to Lisbon because I speak Portuguese and because I insulted you in your office. That doesn't mean I belong in a world of private jets and five-star hotels. Why not? Because Clara gestured helplessly at the city around them, the wealth, the ease, everything she'd never had. Because I'm not like you. I'm not like any of them. I grew up in Queens. I share a one-bedroom apartment with my 78-year-old grandmother. I've never even left New York before last week. This entire trip probably costs more than I make in 6 months. And? Clara stared at him. What do you mean, and? I mean, why does any of that matter? Adrian's expression was unreadable. You're assuming that wealth and background are the same as competence. They're not. You proved that in 2 meetings. It's not that simple. Actually, it is. He stepped closer, and Clara's breath caught. You think the people in that conference room got there because they were born into the right families. Some of them, yes, but most of them clawed their way up the same way you're doing now. They just had more resources to work with. That's a pretty big advantage. It is, Adrian agreed, but it's not everything. Carlos could have hired any translator in Lisbon. He asked for you specifically because you impressed him, not because of where you're from or how much money you have, because you're good at what you do. Clara wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Adrian watched her for a long moment, then said something that surprised her completely. My father was a plumber. Clara blinked. What? Before he started Hale International, he fixed pipes in Brooklyn, worked 16-hour days, came home exhausted, barely made enough to keep the lights on. Adrian's voice was distant, like he was remembering something from very far away. He didn't go to college, didn't have connections, just had an idea and enough stubbornness to make it work. I didn't know that. No, most people don't. It's not in the Forbes profile. A ghost of something, bitterness maybe, crossed his face. People prefer the myth, the genius CEO who built an empire from nothing. They don't want to know about the plumber's son who got lucky. That's not luck, Clara said quietly. That's work. Adrian looked at her, and for just a second his expression softened. Same as what you're doing. Before Clara could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and whatever moment had existed between them disappeared. We need to get back, he said, his voice returning to professional neutrality. Vanessa scheduled a site visit in an hour. They walked back to the hotel in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that felt almost companionable, like they'd said something important without quite realizing it. The site visit turned out to be a massive property in the Chiato district, an old building that had once been a textile factory, now gutted and waiting for renovation. The investors wanted to turn it into luxury condos. Adrian's company would provide the financing. Clara followed the group through empty rooms that echoed with footsteps, half listening to discussions about load-bearing walls and historical preservation requirements. Her mind kept drifting back to Adrian's words by the river. You don't think you belong here? He was right. She didn't. But maybe that was the point. Maybe not belonging meant she could see things the people who'd always had money couldn't. They were on the 3rd floor when Clara noticed something the others had missed. A water stain spreading across the ceiling in one of the larger rooms. Excuse me, she said, interrupting an architect mid-sentence. Is that supposed to be there? Everyone looked up. The architect frowned. No, that's new. Within minutes, they'd discovered a significant leak in the roof. Recent damage from a storm last week that hadn't been disclosed in the initial property report. The kind of damage that would cost hundreds of thousands to repair. João looked furious. Carlos immediately pulled out his phone to call the property owner. Maria just shook her head, muttering something in Portuguese about incompetence. Adrian walked over to where Clara stood near the window. Good eye, he said quietly. I lived in an apartment with leaky ceilings for 3 years. You learn to spot water damage. That observation probably saved us $1 million in unexpected repairs. Clara glanced at him. Does that mean I get a raise? It was meant as a joke, but Adrian didn't smile. Yes, he said simply. Clara's stomach flipped. I was kidding. I'm not. He turned to face her fully. You've been underpaid since you started working for Hale International. Patricia should have flagged it months ago, but she didn't. Consider it corrected. Adrian, Mr. Hale, he corrected gently, glancing at the others across the room. Not here. Right, because here, in front of investors and colleagues, they weren't two people having a conversation. They were a CEO and his assistant. Different worlds, different rules. Clara swallowed the disappointment and nodded. Thank you, Mr. Hale. Something flickered in his eyes. Regret, maybe. But he just turned and walked back to the group, leaving Clara standing alone by the window, trying to figure out what the hell was happening between them. The rest of the afternoon blurred together. More meetings, more contracts. Dinner with local business leaders at another expensive restaurant where Clara smiled politely and spoke when spoken to and tried not to think about the way Adrian had looked at her by the river. By the time she made it back to her hotel room, it was past midnight and she was so exhausted she could barely think straight. She kicked off her shoes, collapsed onto the bed fully clothed, and closed her eyes. Her phone buzzed. Another text from the same unknown number as last night. She knew who it was before she even looked. You should have taken credit for finding that leak. Clara smiled despite herself and typed back, I thought we were being professional, Mr. Hale. The response came immediately. We are, but you still deserve credit. She stared at the screen, her heart doing something complicated again. Why do you care? This time, the 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times, like he was typing and deleting, trying to find the right words. Finally, I'm not sure yet. Clara sat up, suddenly very awake. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. She should stop. She should say goodnight and put the phone down and remember that this, whatever this was, couldn't go anywhere. Instead, she typed, Your father would be proud of you. The empire you built. A long pause. Then, he died before he could see it. Clara's chest tightened. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. Doesn't make it easier. Another pause. Longer this time. No, it doesn't. Clara lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, the phone warm in her hand. Get some rest, Clara. Tomorrow's going to be long. He'd used her first name. She typed back, You too, Adrian. No response. But somehow she knew he was smiling. The next 2 days passed in a blur of negotiations and late-night contract reviews and too much coffee. The deal was coming together, piece by piece, and Clara found herself pulled deeper into the work than she'd expected. She sat in on strategy sessions, offered opinions when asked, caught small errors that would have been expensive later. And slowly, grudgingly, the team started treating her less like an assistant and more like an actual member of the group. Vanessa still watched her with cool assessment, but even she admitted Clara had proven useful. Daniel became a genuine friend, taking her to lunch and explaining the political dynamics of the company in ways that made her head spin. And Adrian. Adrian was a constant presence. Not hovering exactly, but always aware. She'd catch him watching her during meetings, his expression unreadable. He'd ask her opinion on things that had nothing to do with translation. He'd send her texts late at night, nothing inappropriate, just thoughts about the deal or questions about her perspective. It felt like he was testing her, or maybe testing himself. On their 4th night in Lisbon, the team went out to celebrate the contract finally being signed. A trendy bar in Barro Alto with good music and expensive wine, and the kind of atmosphere that made everyone relax slightly. Clara nursed a glass of wine and watched her colleagues slowly transform from business professionals into actual human beings. Vanessa laughed at one of Daniel's terrible jokes. The accountant loosened his tie. Even Adrian seemed marginally less tense, though he still stood slightly apart from the group. Come on, Daniel said, pulling Clara toward the makeshift dance floor. You've been working nonstop for 4 days. Live a little. I don't really dance. Neither do I. That's what makes it fun. He spun her around, deliberately clumsy, and Clara found herself laughing despite her protests. The music was loud and fast, something Portuguese she didn't recognize but liked anyway. She danced with Daniel, then with one of the lawyers, then by herself for a while, letting the wine and the music and the sheer relief of the deal being done wash over her. When she finally stopped, breathless and flushed, she looked up and saw Adrian watching her from across the room. Not with his usual careful neutrality, with something else entirely. Clara's smile faded. He turned away quickly, saying something to Vanessa, his expression sliding back into place like armor. But Clara had seen it. That split second of unguarded want. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was dangerous. She made her way to the bar, ordered water, tried to calm down. You're good at that, a voice said beside her. Clara turned. A man in his late 20s, well-dressed, confident smile. Portuguese accent. At what? She asked. Looking like you belong somewhere you don't. He extended his hand. Miguel, Friend of Carlos. Clara shook it warily. Clara. I know. Carlos mentioned you, the American girl who saved the deal. Miguel's smile widened. He was impressed. That's rare. I just did my job. There it is again. Miguel leaned against the bar, studying her. That thing you do, downplaying yourself. Why? I'm not. You are. His tone was light but knowing. Let me guess. You grew up without money, worked hard for everything, and now you're in a room full of people who've never had to worry about rent, so you make yourself small because it feels safer. Clara stared at him. That's pretty presumptuous, but accurate. She didn't answer. Miguel laughed. I grew up in Alfama. My father sold fish at the market. I know what it's like to not belong in places like this. He gestured at the bar, the crowd, the casual wealth everywhere. But here's the thing. They don't know you don't belong unless you tell them. Is this supposed to be advice? It's perspective. He signaled the bartender for another drink. You did good work this week. Carlos told me your research on the zoning legislation prevented a major problem. That's not luck. That's competence. Thanks, Clara said, unsure how else to respond. So stop apologizing for being here. Miguel's smile turned slightly mischievous. And maybe dance with someone who isn't your colleague. He extended his hand. Clara hesitated. Miguel seemed nice enough, and she was tired of feeling like she didn't belong. She took his hand. They moved back onto the dance floor, and Miguel was actually good at this. Smooth, confident, leading her through steps she didn't know but could follow easily enough. So, he said as they danced, what brings you to Lisbon, besides work? Just work, actually. First time out of the country. And what do you think? It's beautiful. Clara meant it. The city, the food, the people, it feels, I don't know, real somehow. Real as opposed to New York? Real as opposed to the life I normally live. She smiled slightly. This whole trip feels like someone else's life. Maybe it is, Miguel said. Maybe this is who you become when you let yourself. Before Clara could respond, she felt someone's presence beside them. Adrian. He didn't look at Miguel. His eyes were fixed on Clara, and there was something sharp in his expression, something she'd never seen before. We're leaving, he said quietly. Clara blinked. What? The team. We're heading back to the hotel. Early flight tomorrow. It was a lie. Their flight wasn't until tomorrow afternoon, but Clara saw Daniel gathering his things across the room, saw Vanessa checking her phone, and realized this wasn't a suggestion. Miguel, oblivious to the tension, smiled. Shame. We were just getting started. Adrian finally looked at him, and his expression could have frozen fire. She has work to do. Adrian, Clara said softly, I can make my own decisions. The car's outside. He turned and walked away without waiting for a response. Miguel raised an eyebrow. Friend of yours? Boss, Clara said tightly. Ah. Miguel's smile turned knowing. That explains the look. What look? The one that says if I keep dancing with you, I'm going to end up at the bottom of the Tagus River. He stepped back, hands raised in mock surrender. I know when to retreat. But Clara, take my advice. Stop making yourself small. He disappeared into the crowd, leaving Clara standing alone on the dance floor, her face burning with embarrassment and anger. She grabbed her bag and headed for the exit. The car was idling at the curb, sleek and black and completely impersonal. Vanessa and Daniel were already inside. Adrian stood by the door, waiting. That was rude, Clara said as she approached. Get in the car. Excuse me? Adrian's jaw tightened. Please get in the car, Miss Bennett. The formal address stung more than it should have. Clara slid into the back seat as far from Adrian as possible. Daniel tried to make conversation during the drive, but she ignored him, staring out the window at Lisbon passing by in a blur of lights. When they reached the hotel, she was out of the car before it fully stopped. Clara, Adrian called after her. She kept walking. Clara! She spun around in the lobby, not caring who heard. What? Adrian dismissed the others with a glance. They scattered, Vanessa shooting Clara a look that promised future interrogation. Daniel looking deeply uncomfortable. Then it was just the two of them, standing in the empty hotel lobby at 1 a.m, the tension between them thick enough to cut. I'm sorry, Adrian said quietly. That was inappropriate. You pulled me off a dance floor because it was inappropriate, Mom? I pulled you away because... He stopped, his hand raking through his hair in a gesture that looked frustrated and very unlike him. Because I couldn't watch you dance with him anymore. Clara's breath caught. Why not? Adrian stepped closer, and she saw something raw in his expression, something that looked almost like pain. You know why? Her heart was racing now. Say it. Clara, say it, Adrian. The words came out rough, like they'd been dragged from somewhere deep. Because watching another man touch you made me want to put my fist through a wall. Because I can't stop thinking about you. Because I've been trying to keep this professional for 4 days and I'm failing spectacularly. The lobby felt too small, too quiet, too full of everything they weren't saying. This is a bad idea, Clara whispered. I know. You're my boss. This could ruin both our careers. I know. And you're Adrian Hale. I'm nobody. His hand came up, cupping her face with a gentleness that made her chest ache. You're not nobody. Not to me. Clara closed her eyes, leaning into his touch despite every rational thought screaming at her to stop. What are we doing? I don't know, Adrian said honestly, but I can't keep pretending I don't feel this. When she opened her eyes, he was looking at her like she was the only person in the world, and then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't careful. It was desperate and real, and everything Clara hadn't known she wanted until that exact moment. She kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. He tasted like expensive wine, and something darker, something that made her forget every reason this was wrong. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. Come upstairs, he said quietly. Clara's mind screamed warnings, but her heart was already answering. Okay. They barely made it to his suite before his mouth was on hers again, his hands in her hair, her back against the door. Clara gasped, and Adrian pulled back just enough to look at her. Tell me to stop, he said hoarsely. If you want me to stop, tell me now. Clara looked at him, really looked at him, and saw past the billionaire, past the CEO, past all the armor he wore. She saw the man underneath, lonely, scared, desperate for something real. I don't want you to stop, she whispered. That night, in a hotel room overlooking Lisbon, Clara Bennett and Adrian Hale stopped pretending they were just a boss and his assistant. They were something else entirely, and neither of them knew how to make it work. But for those few hours, they stopped caring. Morning came too fast and brought reality with it. Clara woke up tangled in expensive sheets that weren't hers, in a hotel room that cost more per night than her monthly rent, with Adrian Hale's arm draped across her waist like it belonged there. For a moment, she let herself just exist in it. The warmth of his body behind hers, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the way his hand curled loosely against her stomach, possessive even in sleep. Then her phone buzzed on the nightstand, shattering the fragile peace. A text from Mara. Call me when you can. Graham's asking about you. Reality crashed back in. Clara carefully extracted herself from Adrian's embrace and slipped out of bed, gathering her clothes from where they'd been discarded across the floor. Her dress was wrinkled, her shoes were by the door. She felt like she was doing a walk of shame in reverse, except there was no one to witness it but herself. She was halfway to the bathroom when Adrian's voice stopped her. Leaving without saying goodbye? She turned. He was awake, propped up on one elbow, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. His hair was messy. He wasn't wearing a shirt. He looked human in a way that made her chest ache. I didn't want to wake you, Clara said quietly. I'm a light sleeper. He sat up fully, and Clara tried not to notice the way the sheets pooled around his waist. Come here. It wasn't a command. It was a request. A plea, almost. Clara walked back to the bed and sat on the edge, keeping some distance between them. Adrian reached out and took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. Tell me what you're thinking, he said. I'm thinking this was a mistake. His hand stilled. Was it? Clara looked at him, really looked at him, and saw vulnerability there, fear, the same thing she was feeling. I don't know, she admitted. Last night felt right. But this morning feels complicated. It is complicated. Adrian's voice was rough with sleep and something else. But that doesn't mean it was wrong. You're my boss, Adrian. We work together. What happens when we get back to New York and this, whatever this is, falls apart? What makes you think it will? Because things like this always do, especially when there's this much distance between people. She pulled her hand away gently. You live in a penthouse. I live in Queens. You have a daughter and a company and responsibilities I can't even imagine. I have a grandmother who needs me and medical bills I'm drowning in. We don't fit. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that surprised her. My wife died 3 years ago. Claire's breath caught. Adrian, car accident. She was coming home from her mother's house. A drunk driver ran a red light. His voice was flat, emotionless, like he was reciting facts instead of describing the worst moment of his life. Lily was 2. She doesn't remember her mother. All she has are pictures. I'm so sorry. After Catherine died, I stopped feeling things. It was easier that way, safer. He looked at Clara, and there was something raw in his eyes. I built walls so high, I forgot what it felt like to let someone in. And then you sat in my chair and called me a robot, and something cracked. Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes. That's not... I didn't mean... You were right, though. I was a robot. I am a robot most of the time, because it's the only way I know how to survive. Adrian reached for her hand again, and this time she let him take it. But with you, I don't feel like I'm just surviving. I feel like I'm actually living. That's a lot of pressure to put on one person. I know, and I'm not asking you to fix me or save me or whatever romantic nonsense people say. His grip tightened slightly. I'm just asking you to give this a chance. Give us a chance. Clara wanted to say yes. Every part of her wanted to say yes. But the rational part of her brain, the part that had kept her alive through years of struggling and scraping by, was screaming warnings. What happens when people find out? She asked. Your board, the media, your family. Let me worry about that. That's not an answer. Adrian's jaw tightened. The answer is, I don't care what they think. You should. Your reputation, your company, are not more important than you. The words hung in the air between them, too big and too honest and too terrifying. Clara stood up, needing distance. I need to think. Okay? I need to go back to my room and shower and think about this without you looking at me like that. Like what? Like I'm something worth keeping. Adrian stood too, closing the distance between them in 2 strides. He cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. You're worth keeping, he said fiercely, and I'm going to prove it to you, whether you believe it right now or not. He kissed her then, soft and slow and achingly gentle. When he pulled back, Clara felt like her entire world had tilted sideways. Go, Adrian said quietly. Think. But Clara, we're not done talking about this. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and fled to her own room before she could change her mind. The flight back to New York was torture. They sat in the same cabin, breathing the same air, pretending nothing had changed. Adrian worked on his laptop. Clara stared out the window. Daniel tried to make conversation and eventually gave up. Vanessa watched them both with the sharp eyes of someone who knew exactly what had happened and was calculating the implications. When they landed at JFK, Clara grabbed her borrowed suitcase and headed for the exit without saying goodbye to anyone. She took the subway back to Queens because she couldn't afford a car and didn't want to anyway. The train was crowded and smelled like stale coffee and humanity, and it felt more real than anything she'd experienced in the past week. Her grandmother was asleep when Clara let herself into their apartment. The place looked smaller than she remembered, shabbier. The paint was peeling near the ceiling. The kitchen faucet was dripping again. This was her real life. Lisbon had been a beautiful dream, but dreams didn't pay rent. Clara dropped her suitcase in her tiny bedroom and collapsed onto her bed, exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with jet lag. Her phone buzzed. Adrian, did you make it home safely? She stared at the message for a long time before responding. Yes. Can I see you tomorrow? I don't think that's a good idea. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Please. Clara closed her eyes. This was the moment. She could end it now, cleanly, before either of them got hurt worse than they already were. Her fingers moved before her brain could stop them. Okay. She regretted it immediately, but the message was already sent. The next morning, Clara woke to her grandmother humming in the kitchen and the smell of coffee that wasn't fancy or expensive, just familiar. Rosa looked up when Clara emerged, still in her pajamas. "You look terrible." "Thanks, Vovo." "Jet lag or boy problems?" Clara poured herself coffee and sat at their small table. "Can it be both?" Rosa's eyes sharpened. "Tell me." So Clara did. Not everything. Some things were too private to share even with her grandmother, but enough. The trip, the work, Adrian, the impossible situation she'd somehow stumbled into. When she finished, Rosa was quiet for a long time, sipping her coffee and watching Clara with the same assessing look she'd had since Clara was a child. "Do you love him?" Rosa asked finally. "I barely know him." "That's not what I asked." Clara opened her mouth to deny it, then stopped. "I don't know. Maybe. It's too soon to tell. But you feel something." "Yes. And he feels something too." "He says he does." Rosa nodded slowly. "Then the question is not whether you love him. The question is whether you're brave enough to find out." "It's not that simple, Vovo. He's a billionaire. You're what? Not good enough?" Rosa's voice turned sharp. "You think money makes someone better than you? You think wealth means he deserves happiness and you don't?" "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" Clara struggled to find the words. "I mean that his world and my world don't overlap. Eventually, one of us will have to give up everything to make this work, and I'm terrified it'll be me." Rosa reached across the table and took Clara's hand. "Or maybe you build a new world together, one that fits both of you." "That's very romantic, but it's not realistic." "Realistic?" Rosa snorted. "You know what's realistic? Dying alone because you were too scared to take a chance. I've seen it happen to too many people." "I'm not scared." "Yes, you are, and that's okay. But don't let fear make your decisions for you." Before Clara could respond, her phone rang. An unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Hello? Miss Bennett?" A woman's voice, crisp and professional. "This is Patricia from Mr. Hale's office. He's asked me to arrange a car to pick you up at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Will that work for your schedule?" Claire's stomach flipped. "Actually, I was planning to meet him somewhere." Mr. Hale specified the car should bring you to his residence. He said you'd understand. His residence. Not his office. Not a restaurant. His home. Where his daughter lived. "Miss Bennett?" "Yes, 2 o'clock is fine." She hung up and found her grandmother smiling knowingly. "Not scared, "Shut up, Vovo." The car that arrived at 2 o'clock was exactly the kind of car Clara expected. Sleek, black, driven by someone in an actual uniform. Her neighbors definitely noticed. Mrs. Chen from 3B was practically pressed against her window. Clara slid into the back seat wearing the nicest casual outfit she owned. Jeans that didn't have holes. A blouse Mara had helped her pick out last year. Flats that were comfortable but looked intentional. The drive into Manhattan felt endless. They crossed the bridge, wound through traffic, and eventually pulled up to a building that made Clara's chest tight. It was one of those buildings, the kind with a doorman and a marble lobby, and the kind of security that made you feel unwelcome even if you'd been invited. A doorman opened her car door. "Miss Bennett, Mr. Hale is expecting you. Penthouse level." Of course it was the penthouse. The elevator was made of glass and steel and rose so smoothly Clara barely felt it moving. When it opened directly into an apartment, not a hallway, an actual apartment, she had to remind herself to breathe. Adrian was waiting. He'd changed from his usual suit into jeans and a dark sweater that made him look younger. More approachable. Almost normal, if you ignored the apartment behind him that probably cost more than most people made in a lifetime. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi." They stood there for a moment, the awkwardness of the morning after mixing with something newer, something more fragile. "Come in," Adrian said finally, stepping back. Clara walked into the apartment and tried not to stare. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, furniture that was clearly expensive but also clearly lived in, toys scattered near a bookshelf, a child's drawing stuck to the refrigerator with a magnet. This wasn't just a showpiece. Someone actually lived here. "Lily's at a play date," Adrian said, following her gaze to the toys. "She'll be back around 4. I wanted to talk to you first, without her here." "Okay." He gestured toward the couch, and they sat, careful to leave space between them. "I've been thinking about what you said this morning," Adrian began. "About our worlds not fitting, about the distance between us." "Adrian, let me finish." He turned to face her fully. "You're right, there is distance, not just economic distance, but experiential distance. I grew up in a world that gave me advantages you never had. That's not fair, and I can't change it." Clara waited, unsure where he was going with this. "But," Adrian continued, "that distance doesn't mean we can't meet in the middle. It doesn't mean this can't work if we both want it to." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to try, really try. Not secretly, not carefully. I want to date you properly, take you to dinner, introduce you to my daughter, see where this goes." Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. "People will talk." "Let them. Your board will have opinions. They always do. I stopped caring about their opinions on my personal life years ago. The media will be invasive and awful and print things that aren't true. I know. I've dealt with them before." Adrian reached for her hand. "But Clara, I've spent 3 years hiding from anything that felt real because I was terrified of losing it. I don't want to live like that anymore. What if it doesn't work? What if we try this and it falls apart, and then everything's ruined? Then it falls apart, and we figure it out like adults." His grip tightened. "But what if it does work? What if this is exactly what both of us need?" Clara looked at him, at the hope in his eyes, the vulnerability he was offering her, and felt her carefully constructed walls start to crumble. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Me too. I've never done anything like this before. Neither have I. Not like this." They sat in silence for a moment, hands clasped, the city stretching out beyond the windows. "Okay," Clara said finally. Adrian's eyes widened slightly. "Okay? Let's try. But Adrian, if this is going to work, you can't make decisions for me. No more sending cars without asking first. No more announcing things without checking with me. We're equals in this. Or we're nothing." Something like relief washed over his face. "Equals, I can do that. And I meet Lily on my terms. When I'm ready. Not because you decided it's time. Deal. And if your board or your family or anyone tries to push me out, you back me up. Publicly. No half measures." Adrian pulled her closer. "Anyone tries to hurt you, they'll have to go through me first." "That's very dramatic." "I'm a dramatic person. You just haven't seen that side yet." Clara laughed despite herself. "I'm starting to think I don't know you at all. You know me better than most people." Adrian's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "You know I take my coffee black, that I can't cook to save my life, that I read Lily the same 3 bedtime stories on rotation because they're her favorites, that I check my phone at 2 a.m. because I can't sleep. Those are just facts. They're the facts I don't tell anyone else." He leaned forward until their foreheads touched. "You know I'm terrified of failing her, of not being enough as a parent, of Lily growing up and resenting me for not giving her the childhood she deserves." Clara's throat felt tight. "You're a good father, Adrian." "How do you know?" "Because you're here. Because you rush home every night to read her stories. Because you're scared of failing her, which means you care enough to worry." Adrian kissed her then, slow and deep and full of things they hadn't said yet. When they pulled apart, Clara rested her head against his shoulder, and for the first time in days, the knot in her chest loosened slightly. "So," she said after a while, "what now?" "Now we take this one day at a time. No pressure, no expectations. Just seeing where it goes." "That sounds reasonable." "I'm capable of being reasonable. Evidence suggests otherwise." Adrian laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was so unexpected and genuine that Clara felt something shift in her chest. Maybe this could work. Maybe Rosa was right, and she was brave enough to find out. They spent the next hour talking, really talking, about his childhood in Brooklyn, back when his father was still just a plumber with big dreams, about Clara's parents, who died in a car accident when she was 12, leaving her to be raised by Rosa, about Catherine, Adrian's late wife, and how grief didn't follow a timeline no matter how much people expected it to. "I don't talk about her much," Adrian admitted. "It feels disloyal somehow. Like, if I move on, I'm erasing her." "Moving on isn't erasing. It's surviving." "Is that what you think we're doing? Surviving?" Clara considered the question. I think we're both trying to figure out how to live again after losing people we loved. That's not the same as replacing them. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Catherine would have liked you. She had a thing about calling people on their bullshit, too. I'm honored to be compared to someone who called you on your bullshit. You should be. She was the only person who ever did it successfully. Until me. Until you. Adrian smiled slightly. You're terrifying, you know that? Good. Someone has to keep you honest. At 3:45, Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his entire demeanor shifted, softened in a way Clara hadn't seen before. Lily's on her way up, he said. Her nanny just texted. Clara's stomach flipped. I thought you said 4. Traffic was lighter than expected. Adrian stood, suddenly looking nervous in a way that was almost endearing. You don't have to meet her today. You can go if you want. I'll understand. Clara stood too. Do you want me to go? No, but I also don't want to push you. Then I'll stay. Just don't make a big deal out of it, okay? I'm just a friend from work who stopped by. Friend from work. For now. Adrian nodded, but Clara could see the relief in his eyes. The elevator dinged. A moment later, a tiny tornado in a pink dress came running into the apartment, followed by a patient-looking woman in her 50s carrying a backpack covered in unicorn stickers. Daddy! The little girl launched herself at Adrian, who caught her easily and spun her around. How was Emma's house? We played princesses, and I was Elsa, and Emma was Anna, and we made a castle out of blocks. But then Emma's brother knocked it down, and Emma cried, but I didn't because I'm brave. She said it all in one breath, her dark curls bouncing. You're very brave, Adrian agreed, setting her down. Lily, there's someone I'd like you to meet. This is Miss Clara. She works with Daddy. Lily turned to look at Clara with the kind of direct, assessing stare that only small children could pull off. Hi, Clara said, crouching down to Lily's level. It's nice to meet you. You're pretty, Lily announced. Are you Daddy's girlfriend? Clara nearly choked. Adrian looked mortified. Lily, Emma's mom has a boyfriend, and he comes over for dinner and they hold hands. Do you hold hands with Daddy? Sometimes people who work together hold hands, Clara said carefully, trying not to laugh at the expression on Adrian's face. But usually just to shake hello. Lily considered this seriously. Can we shake hands? Absolutely. They shook hands with exaggerated formality, and Lily giggled. Your hands are soft. Daddy's hands are scratchy. That's because Daddy needs to moisturize more, Clara said without thinking. Adrian raised an eyebrow. Noted. Lily was already moving on, her attention span typical for a 5-year-old. Miss Clara, do you like hot chocolate? Maria makes the best hot chocolate. The nanny, Maria, apparently, smiled. Would you like some, Miss Bennett? I'd love some, Clara said, even though she didn't particularly like hot chocolate. Lily grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the kitchen, chattering about her play date and the blocks and how Emma's brother was mean, but not always, only sometimes. Adrian followed, looking slightly stunned. They sat at the kitchen island while Maria made hot chocolate that smelled genuinely amazing. Lily talked non-stop, occasionally asking Clara questions that ranged from, do you have a dog, to why is the sky blue, to if you could be any animal, what would you be? Clara answered as best she could, aware of Adrian watching them with an expression she couldn't quite read. When Maria excused herself to start dinner, Lily turned her full attention to Clara. Miss Clara, do you want to see my room? I have a fish tank with 3 fish. Their names are Bubbles and Sparkle and Steve. Steve? Daddy named that one. Lily rolled her eyes in a gesture so reminiscent of an exasperated teenager that Clara had to bite back a laugh. I'd love to see your fish. Lily grabbed her hand again and dragged her down the hall to a bedroom that was exactly what Clara expected. Pink and purple and covered in stuffed animals and drawings. The fish tank sat on a dresser, and sure enough, 3 goldfish swam in lazy circles. That's Bubbles, that's Sparkle, and that's Steve, Lily pointed to each one. Steve is Daddy's favorite because he says Steve doesn't care about being fancy. Steve sounds very practical. Daddy says I'm not practical. I don't know what that means. It means you have a good imagination, Lily beamed. I do have a good imagination. Sometimes I pretend I'm a mermaid and the bathtub is the ocean. They spent 20 minutes looking at Lily's toys and books and the elaborate drawings she'd made that covered one entire wall. Clara asked questions and listened to the rambling answers and tried to ignore the way her chest felt too full. This little girl was so full of life, so enthusiastic and bright and untouched by the grief that had shaped her father. When they finally emerged from the bedroom, Adrian was leaning against the wall in the hallway, watching them. "Daddy, Miss Clara likes my drawings," Lily announced. "Of course she does. They're excellent drawings." "She said I have a good imagination." "You do." Lily yawned suddenly, the play date and the excitement catching up with her. "Can Miss Clara stay for dinner?" Clara opened her mouth to politely decline, but Adrian spoke first. "If she wants to." He was looking at her with those gray eyes, asking a question that had nothing to do with dinner. "I'd like that," Clara heard herself say. Dinner was surprisingly normal. Maria had made chicken and rice and vegetables, and they ate in the dining room that overlooked the park. Lily talked through most of the meal, telling stories that went nowhere and asking questions that had no answers. Adrian was patient with her, gently redirecting when she got too wild, answering her questions seriously even when they were absurd. Watching him with his daughter, Clara saw a side of him she'd never witnessed before. Soft, playful, completely devoted. It made her heart ache in ways she wasn't ready to examine. After dinner, Lily started falling asleep at the table, fighting it hard but losing the battle. "Bedtime," Adrian said gently, scooping her up. "But Miss Clara's still here," Lily protested sleepily. "Miss Clara will be here when you wake up if she wants to be." Lily looked at Clara with drowsy eyes. "Will you?" Clara's throat felt tight. "We'll see, sweetheart." "Okay." Lily yawned again. "Goodbye, Miss Clara." "Goodbye, Lily." Adrian carried his daughter down the hall, and Clara heard him talking softly to her, the words too low to make out. Maria appeared with coffee. "He's good with her." "He is." "She needs more people in her life, people who care." Maria set the cup down and looked at Clara directly. "He does too." Before Clara could respond, Maria disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Clara alone with her thoughts and the city lights beyond the windows. Adrian returned 15 minutes later, looking exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with work. "She's out," he said, sitting beside Clara on the couch. "Completely. She'll sleep through anything now." "She's wonderful. She's a lot." "In the best way." Adrian smiled slightly. "She liked you. That's rare. She's usually shy around new people." "I didn't do anything special." "You listened to her. Really listened. Most people humor children. You actually engaged with her." Clara shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "She's easy to talk to." "She asked if you were my girlfriend." "I noticed." "What did you tell her?" "That sometimes people who work together hold hands, but usually just to shake hello." Adrian laughed quietly. "That's diplomatic." "I'm learning from the best." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, shoulders touching, the apartment quiet except for the distant sounds of the city below. "Thank you," Adrian said finally. "For what?" "For staying, for meeting her, for giving this a chance." He turned to face her. "I know it's complicated and messy and probably insane. It is all of those things. But I meant what I said earlier. I want to try, really try." Clara looked at him, at the hope and fear and vulnerability in his expression, and felt the last of her resistance crumble. "Then let's try," she said softly. Adrian kissed her, gentle and grateful and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Clara rested her head on his shoulder and let herself imagine just for a moment what it might be like if this actually worked. If she could belong here, in this world of penthouses and private jets and a little girl with 3 goldfish named Bubbles, Sparkle, and Steve. It still felt impossible. But maybe impossible was just another word for not yet. Clara left around 9, after another cup of coffee and more conversation that felt easy in ways she wasn't used to. Adrian walked her to the elevator, his hand warm against the small of her back. "I'll see you at work tomorrow?" he asked. "Unless you've decided to fire me for fraternizing with the boss. I think I can overlook it this once." The elevator arrived, and Clara stepped inside. Before the doors could close, Adrian caught her hand. "Clara?" "Yeah?" "This is real for me. I need you to know that." Her chest felt too full. "It's real for me, too." The doors closed, and Clara rode down alone, her heart racing and her mind spinning and everything feeling too big and too fragile and too terrifyingly perfect. The car dropped her back in Queens, and she climbed the stairs to her apartment, feeling like she'd just returned from another planet. Rosa was still awake, watching a telenovela with the volume too loud. "Well?" she asked when Clara walked in. "It's complicated. Love always is." "I didn't say I loved him." Rosa just smiled knowingly and turned back to her show. Clara went to her room and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Adrian's hands and Lily's laugh and the way the city had looked from 30 floors up. Her phone buzzed. "Thank you for tonight. Sleep well." Clara smiled and typed back, "You too." She fell asleep still smiling, unaware that in less than a week, everything would change. And not for the better. The first 3 days back at work were almost normal, if you ignored the fact that Clara's entire world had tilted sideways. She and Adrian were careful, professional. They didn't arrive together or leave together. They didn't touch in front of other people. In meetings, he called her Miss Bennett, and she called him Mr. Hale, and anyone watching would have seen nothing unusual. But Clara felt the weight of his gaze during strategy sessions. She caught him smiling at something she said when he thought no one was looking. And at night, after Lily was asleep, he'd text her things that made her heart do complicated gymnastics in her chest. "Lily asked if you were coming back for dinner." "What did you tell her?" "That you were busy." "She suggested I should make you less busy." "Smart kid. She gets it from me." Debatable. Clara was learning the rhythm of his life in pieces. How he woke up at 5 every morning to work out before Lily got up. How he read the financial news over coffee that was always too hot and too black. How he'd call Lily's school in the middle of meetings just to check that she'd remembered her lunch. He was a better father than he gave himself credit for, and it made Clara's chest ache every time she witnessed it. On Thursday, Vanessa cornered her in the break room. "You've been different since Lisbon," she said without preamble, her eyes sharp and assessing. Clara's stomach dropped. "Different how?" "More confident. You speak up in meetings now. You don't apologize for taking up space." Vanessa poured herself coffee with precise movements. "It's good. Whatever happened over there, it changed something." Clara forced herself to breathe normally. "I just got more comfortable with the work." Vanessa's tone suggested she didn't believe that for a second. "Word of advice, though, be careful." "Of what?" "Of getting too comfortable." Vanessa met her eyes directly. "This company eats people alive, especially people who don't know how to protect themselves." She walked away before Clara could respond, leaving her standing alone with her lukewarm coffee and the distinct feeling that Vanessa knew exactly what was happening and was choosing, for now, not to say anything about it. That night, Adrian asked Clara to dinner. Not at his apartment, not somewhere public where they'd be seen. A small Italian restaurant in Brooklyn that his father used to take him to when he was a kid. "It's not fancy," he warned when the car dropped them off. "The wine comes in carafes, and the tablecloths are plastic." Sounds perfect. Inside, it was exactly as he'd described. Red and white checkered tablecloths, photos of Italy on the walls, an old woman behind the counter who took one look at Adrian and started shouting in Italian. "Adriano, quanto tempo? Troppo tempo." Adrian actually smiled, not the careful, professional smile Clara had seen him use in meetings, but something genuine and warm. "Ciao, Nonna Rosa. Come stai?" "Better now that you're here." "And who is this?" The old woman turned to Clara, her eyes twinkling. "Finally, you bring a girl who isn't from the magazines." Clara felt her face heat. "I'm Clara." "She's beautiful. You keep her, Adriano." Nonna Rosa patted Adrian's cheek with affection that suggested she'd known him his entire life. "Your papa, he would like her. She has kind eyes." They were seated at a corner table, and Nonna Rosa brought them wine without asking, along with bread that was still warm and olive oil that tasted like sunshine. "She knew your father?" Clara asked when they were alone. "My whole family. This was our Sunday dinner place for years." Adrian's voice went soft with memory. "After my mom died, Dad and I would come here every week. He'd talk about expanding the business, and Nonna Rosa would tell him he was dreaming too big. But he wasn't. No. He just didn't live long enough to see it happen." Adrian took a sip of wine. "Heart attack. He was 53. I was 24 and suddenly running a company I barely understood. Clara reached across the table and took his hand. That must have been terrifying. It was. I kept thinking he'd walk in and tell me I was doing it all wrong. Adrian's thumb traced circles on her palm. Some days I still think that. You built an empire, Adrian. That's not doing it wrong. I built it by being ruthless, by making decisions that hurt people, by prioritizing profit over everything else. He met her eyes. I'm not sure that's what he would have wanted. Then change it. It's not that simple. Why not? You're the CEO. You can make whatever decisions you want. Adrian laughed quietly, but there was no humor in it. You think I have that much power? The board controls everything. My uncle, my cousins, investors who've been with the company since my father started it. They all have opinions about how things should run. And what do you think? I think I'm tired of making decisions based on what other people want instead of what's right. He squeezed her hand. Being with you is the first time in years I've done something just because I wanted to, not because it made financial sense or looked good to shareholders. How's that working out for you? Terrifying, but worth it. They ate pasta that was simple and perfect, and Nonna Rosa kept bringing them things they hadn't ordered. Extra bread, more wine, tiramisu that melted on Clara's tongue. She's trying to fatten me up, Clara whispered. She thinks you're too skinny. It's an Italian grandmother thing. My grandmother does the same thing, except with Brazilian food. I'd like to meet her properly sometime. Your grandmother. Clara's heart stuttered. That's a big step. I know, but I meant what I said. I'm not doing this halfway. After dinner, they walked along the Brooklyn waterfront, the Manhattan skyline glittering across the water. It was late April now, still cool, but not cold, and the boardwalk was mostly empty except for a few joggers and people walking dogs. Adrian reached for her hand and Clara let him take it. Can I ask you something? She said after a while. Anything. What happened with Victoria? Adrian's hand tensed in hers. Who told you about Victoria? No one. I overheard someone mention her at the charity gala, before we went to Lisbon. He was quiet for so long Clara thought he might not answer. Then he sighed. Victoria Lang. We were engaged 5 years ago. Met at a business function, dated for 8 months, got engaged because it made sense on paper. His voice was flat, emotionless. 3 weeks before the wedding, my mother had a stroke. She died 2 days later. Clara's chest tightened. Adrian, the day of the funeral, Victoria told me she couldn't marry someone who was emotionally unavailable, said I was too closed off, too cold, that she needed someone who could actually feel things. He laughed bitterly. She broke off the engagement while I was standing in the cemetery. Literally. We'd just buried my mother. That's cruel. It was honest. I was emotionally unavailable. I am emotionally unavailable most of the time. That's not true, isn't it? Adrian stopped walking and turned to face her. I spent 3 years after Catherine died barely feeling anything. I automated my emotions. Work, Lily, sleep, repeat. I became exactly what Victoria accused me of being. You're not that person now. How do you know? Because that person wouldn't be standing here telling me this. That person wouldn't have asked me to dinner or introduced me to his daughter or held my hand on a public boardwalk where anyone could see. Adrian cupped her face in his hands, and in the glow of the city lights, Clara saw something raw in his expression. You scare me, he said quietly. Why? Because you make me feel things I thought I'd buried. Because when I'm with you, I can't hide behind the walls I've built. Because... He stopped, struggling with the words. Because if I let myself love you and then lose you, I don't think I'll survive it. Clara's throat felt too tight. You're not going to lose me. You can't promise that. No. But I can promise to try. Isn't that enough? He kissed her then, soft and desperate, and full of everything they were both too scared to say out loud. When they pulled apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. Come home with me tonight. I should get back to my grandmother. Keep it. Please. Just tonight. I'll have you back in Queens by morning, I promise. I don't want to be alone. The vulnerability in his voice broke something in Clara's chest. Okay, she whispered. They took a car back to his penthouse, and this time it felt different. Less urgent, more intentional. Like they were building something instead of just running from their separate lonelinesses. Maria had already put Lily to bed hours ago. The apartment was quiet, just the two of them and the city lights beyond the windows. Adrian poured them wine, and they sat on the couch, legs tangled, talking about nothing and everything. His childhood in Brooklyn, her memories of her parents before they died, the weird habits they'd both developed living alone. I eat cereal for dinner at least twice a week, Clara admitted. I alphabetize my books. That's not weird, that's organized. I alphabetize them by author's first name, not last name. Clara laughed. Okay, that's weird. Lily says it doesn't make sense. She's 5 and she's already judging my organizational system. Smart kid. She really is. Adrian's expression softened. She asked about you again today. Wanted to know when Miss Clara was coming back. What did you tell her? That you were busy with work. Then she suggested we should kidnap you so you'd have to stay. Also smart. Slightly illegal, but smart. Adrian smiled and he fell into comfortable silence. Clara felt herself relaxing in ways she rarely did, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. This felt dangerous, feeling this safe with someone, letting her guard down. But she was too tired to fight it. She must have dozed off, because the next thing she knew, Adrian was gently shaking her awake. Come on, he said softly. Let's get you to bed. He led her to his bedroom, a space she'd been in before but never really looked at. It was surprisingly sparse for a billionaire. A large bed, dark furniture, one painting on the wall that looked expensive but not showy. The only personal touch was a photo on the nightstand. Adrian, Catherine, and a tiny baby Lily, all three of them smiling at the camera. Clara picked it up without thinking. She was beautiful. She was. Adrian came to stand beside her. That was taken a month before the accident, Lily's 2nd birthday. Do you still miss her? Every day. But it's different now, less sharp, more like a dull ache that I've learned to live with. Clara set the photo down carefully. Does it bother you that I'm here, in your room, with her photo right there? Adrian was quiet for a moment. Catherine would want me to be happy. She told me that, actually, before she died. Not right before, but once when we were talking about what would happen if something happened to one of us. She made me promise not to be alone forever. That's a hard promise to keep. I know. I broke it for 3 years. He turned Clara to face him. But I'm trying to keep it now. They made love slowly that night, learning each other in ways they hadn't in Lisbon. Less desperate, more tender. And afterward, Clara lay in Adrian's arms and let herself imagine what it would be like if this was her life. Waking up in this bed every morning, having breakfast with Lily, belonging here. It still felt impossible, but less impossible than before. The morning shattered everything. Clara woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the sound of a child's voice in the hallway. Daddy! Daddy, wake up! Maria made pancakes! Her eyes flew open. Adrian was already awake beside her, his expression shifting from sleepy contentment to panic in half a second. Stay here, he whispered, throwing on clothes. I'll handle it. He slipped out of the room, closing the door behind him, and Clara heard him redirecting Lily toward the kitchen. She sat up, her heart pounding. This was exactly the situation they'd been trying to avoid, Lily finding her here. Questions neither of them were ready to answer. Clara dressed quickly, finger-combing her hair and trying to look like she hadn't spent the night in her boss's bed. When she emerged 15 minutes later, Adrian was in the kitchen with Lily, who was drowning her pancakes in syrup and chattering about a dream she'd had involving unicorns and dragons. Maria looked up when Clara entered, her expression carefully neutral, and Clara knew she'd been made. Good morning, Miss Clara. Lily's face lit up. Did you have a sleepover with Daddy? Adrian nearly choked on his coffee. Clara forced a smile. Something like that. Can we have a sleepover too? Emma has sleepovers with her friends, and they stay up late and watch movies. Maybe when you're older, sweetheart, Adrian said, recovering. Finish your breakfast. Clara sat at the island, accepting the coffee Maria offered with a grateful nod. The situation felt surreal, sitting here in yesterday's clothes, drinking coffee with Adrian's daughter like this was normal. Miss Clara, do you like pancakes? Lily asked through a mouthful of food. I do. Maria makes the best pancakes, better than Daddy. Daddy burns everything. I do not burn everything, Adrian protested. You burned toast last week. That was one time. And eggs. The pan was too hot. And grilled cheese. Adrian looked at Clara helplessly. In my defense, I was distracted. Maria set a plate of pancakes in front of Clara, and for a moment the domestic normalcy of it all made her chest ache. This could be her life. Morning pancakes with Lily, coffee with Adrian, the easy rhythm of a family. But families didn't work like this. You couldn't just decide overnight to become part of someone else's world. Her phone buzzed, a text from Mara. Where are you? Graham's freaking out, said you never came home. Clara's stomach dropped. She'd texted Rosa last night to say she'd be late, but she hadn't said she wasn't coming home at all. I need to go, she said, standing abruptly. Adrian looked up, concerned. What's wrong? My grandmother. I forgot to tell her I wouldn't be home. Clara grabbed her bag, her face burning with embarrassment. I'm sorry. I have to. I'll have Marcus drive you. I can take the subway. Clara. Adrian's voice was gentle but firm. Let me help. She wanted to argue, but she was already late and her grandmother was worried and fighting about it would only make things worse. Okay, thank you. Lily looked confused. Why do you have to go? Because my grandmother needs me, sweetheart. Will you come back? Clara's throat felt tight. I hope so. The car ride back to Queens felt like traveling between two different universes. From Adrian's penthouse with its marble and glass and endless space to her cramped apartment where the kitchen faucet was still dripping and the paint was still peeling. Rosa was waiting when Clara walked in, arms crossed, expression somewhere between worried and furious. Where were you? I'm sorry, Vovo, I should have called. You should have come home. It's one thing to date a billionaire, Clara. It's another thing to disappear into his world and forget where you came from. The words stung because they were true. I didn't forget. Didn't you? Rosa's voice softened slightly. Look at yourself. You're wearing yesterday's clothes. You smell like expensive cologne. You didn't even text me properly. I know, I messed up. I'm sorry. Rosa studied her for a long moment, then sighed. Sit down. I'll make coffee. They sat at their small kitchen table, and Clara told her everything. The dinner in Brooklyn, the walk along the waterfront, waking up to Lily asking about sleepovers. You're in deep, Rosa said when she finished. I know. And you're scared. Terrified. Rosa reached across the table and took Clara's hand. Listen to me, querida. Love is supposed to be scary. If it's not scary, it's not real. This feels too real, too fast. Then slow down. Talk to him. Set boundaries. Rosa's grip tightened. But don't run away just because it's hard. You've never run from hard things before. Clara's phone buzzed. Adrian. Are you okay? Did you make it home safely? She typed back. I'm fine, just dealing with some things. Can I see you tonight? Clara looked at her grandmother, at their small apartment, at the life she'd built here. I need a few days, is that okay? The three dots appeared and disappeared several times. Of course, take whatever time you need. But Clara could feel the worry behind the words, the fear that she was pulling away. Maybe she was. The next 4 days were strange. Clara went to work, did her job, avoided being alone with Adrian. He respected the distance she'd asked for, but she caught him watching her during meetings with an expression that made her heart hurt. Vanessa definitely noticed something was off. Daniel tried to ask if everything was okay. Even Patricia seemed to be looking at her differently. On the 5th day, Adrian asked her to stay after a late meeting. Everyone else filed out, and then it was just the two of them in the conference room, the city lights glowing beyond the windows. Talk to me, Adrian said quietly. About what? About why you've been avoiding me all week. About what changed. Clara sat down, suddenly exhausted. Nothing changed. That's the problem. I don't understand. We're still the same people we were before Lisbon. You're still a billionaire CEO with a daughter and responsibilities I can't imagine. I'm still a girl from Queens who eats cereal for dinner and shares a bedroom with her grandmother. So? So this doesn't work. Not long term. One of us is going to have to give up everything to make it fit, and I'm scared it's going to be me. Adrian moved to sit beside her. What if neither of us has to give up anything? That's not realistic. Why not? Because, Clara struggled to find the words, because your world is here. The penthouse, the company, the life you've built. And my world is in Queens. My grandmother, my friends, the person I am when I'm not trying to fit into your life. You don't have to fit into my life. We can build a new life. Together. You don't understand. I woke up in your apartment the other morning, and for a second I forgot who I was. I forgot that I'm the girl who worries about rent and medical bills. I started thinking maybe I could belong there, and that terrifies me. Why does it terrify you? Because what happens when this falls apart? Claire's voice cracked. What happens when you realize I'm not enough? When your family or your board or the media decides I'm not good enough for you? I go back to Queens, and I've lost myself in the process. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. After Catherine died, I promised myself I'd never let anyone get close enough to hurt me again. I built walls so high I couldn't see over them. And then you walked into my life and knocked them all down without even trying. Adrian, I'm terrified too, Clara, every single day. I'm terrified I'm going to mess this up, that I'm going to push you too hard or not hard enough, that Lily's going to get attached and you're going to leave, that I'm going to fall in love with you and you're going to decide I'm not worth the trouble. You are worth the trouble. Then prove it. Stop running. Stop assuming this is going to fail before we've even really tried. He took her hands in his. I'm not asking you to give up who you are. I'm asking you to let me be part of your world while you're part of mine. Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes. I don't know how to do that. Neither do I. But we figure it out together. He squeezed her hands. Please, Clara, give us a real chance. Not perfect. Not easy. Just real. She looked at him, at the vulnerability in his eyes, the hope and fear mixed together, and felt something shift in her chest. Okay, she whispered. Okay? Let's figure it out. Together. Adrian pulled her into his arms, and Clara let herself sink into the embrace, breathing in his scent, feeling his heart beat against hers. They sat like that for a long time, holding each other in the empty conference room, the city glowing around them. When they finally pulled apart, Adrian cupped her face in his hands. I need to tell you something, he said. What? There's a charity gala next weekend, big event, media, investors, board members, everyone. His jaw tightened. I want you to come with me, as my date, publicly. Clara's stomach flipped. Adrian, I know it's a lot. I know it's going to be intense, but I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of pretending you're just my employee when you're so much more than that. What about your family? The board? Let me worry about them. That's not an answer. The answer is I don't care what they think. I care about you, and I'm done letting other people's opinions control my life. Clara thought about what Rosa had said, about not running from hard things. Okay, she said finally. Adrian's eyes widened. Okay? I'll go to the gala, but Adrian, if we're doing this publicly, you need to be ready for what comes after. The questions, the media, the judgment, all of it. I'm ready. Are you sure? He kissed her then, deep and sure and full of certainty. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Clara kissed him back, trying to believe it, trying to trust that maybe, just maybe, this could actually work. But in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered warnings about charity galas and families, and the ways that worlds collided and burned. She ignored the voice. For now she had Adrian's arms around her and the promise of something real. That would have to be enough. The week before the gala passed in a blur of preparations Clara hadn't anticipated, and anxiety she couldn't shake. Mara took her shopping for a dress, which turned into an argument about whether Clara should let Adrian pay for it. He offered, Mara said, holding up a sleek black gown that cost more than Clara's monthly rent. Just let him help. I can't show up wearing a dress he bought me. I don't know, it feels wrong. Why? He's your boyfriend. Boyfriends buy their girlfriends nice things. Billionaire boyfriends buy their girlfriends nice things. Normal boyfriends maybe spring for dinner. Mara lowered the dress and looked at Clara seriously. You're going to have to get comfortable with the fact that he has money, because fighting him on every single thing is exhausting, and I'm not even the one dating him. Clara knew she was right, but accepting Adrian's money felt like accepting that she couldn't take care of herself, and that stung in ways she couldn't fully articulate. They compromised. Clara bought a dress she could almost afford, deep emerald green, simple but elegant, and told herself she'd eat cereal for the next month to make up the difference in her budget. Rosa helped her practice walking in heels without looking like a baby deer learning to stand. Shoulders back, Rosa instructed, watching Clara wobble across their tiny living room. You belong there just as much as anyone else. Stop walking like you're apologizing for existing. I'm not apologizing. You are. I can see it in your posture. Rosa tapped Clara's shoulder blade. Confidence, querida, even if you have to fake it. The night before the gala, Adrian called her after Lily went to bed. How are you feeling? He asked. Terrified. You? Same. There was a pause. My uncle called today. Richard. He's on the board. Clara's stomach tightened. What did he say? That bringing you to the gala was a mistake, that it would raise questions about my judgment, that the optics were bad. Adrian's voice was tight with anger. I told him where he could shove his optics. Adrian, I'm not changing my mind, Clara. You're coming to this gala. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. What if the board tries to force you out? They can't. I own controlling shares. My father made sure of that before he died. He exhaled slowly. But they can make things difficult. They can leak stories to the press. They can create problems with investors. Maybe your uncle's right. Maybe this is bad timing. There's never going to be good timing. There's always going to be a reason to wait, to hide, to keep this quiet. His voice softened. But I don't want to hide you anymore. Clara closed her eyes, phone pressed to her ear, trying to ignore the fear coiling in her stomach. Okay, she said quietly. Tomorrow, then. Tomorrow. I'll pick you up at 6. Adrian? Yeah? Thank you for choosing this, for choosing me. Always, he said, and hung up before she could respond. The car arrived at exactly 6 o'clock the next evening, sleek and black and impossible to miss on her street in Queens. Claire kissed her grandmother goodbye, ignored the neighbors staring through their windows, and slid into the back seat where Adrian was waiting. He looked devastating in a tailored tuxedo, his hair perfectly styled, every inch the billionaire CEO the world expected him to be. But when he saw Clara, his expression softened into something that looked almost like awe. You're beautiful, he said quietly. You're not so bad yourself. He reached for her hand and Clara let him take it, trying to calm her racing heart. Last chance to back out, Adrian said. We can turn this car around right now, no judgment. Clara looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the same fear she was feeling reflected in his eyes. No backing out, she said. We're doing this. The gala was being held at the Plaza Hotel, because of course it was. When their car pulled up, there were photographers everywhere, cameras flashing like lightning, people shouting questions Clara couldn't make out over the noise. Adrian squeezed her hand. Ready? No, but let's go anyway. The car door opened and Adrian stepped out first, immediately surrounded by flashing lights and shouted questions. Then he turned and offered Clara his hand. She took it and stepped out into the chaos. The cameras went insane. Mr. Hale, who's your date? Are you two together? What's her name? How long have you been seeing each other? Adrian kept his hand firmly on the small of Clara's back, guiding her through the crowd with practiced ease. He didn't answer any questions, didn't acknowledge the photographers, just kept moving forward until they were through the doors and into the relative calm of the hotel lobby. Clara's hands were shaking. Breathe, Adrian said softly. The hard part's over. That was the hard part? We haven't even gone inside yet. Trust me, photographers are easier than my family. He wasn't wrong. The ballroom was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows, tables draped in white linen and covered with elaborate flower arrangements. Hundreds of people in evening wear, all of them wealthy, all of them connected, all of them turning to look when Adrian Hale walked in with an unknown woman on his arm. Clara felt like she was being dissected with every glance. Adrian, a man in his 50s approached, his expression carefully neutral. Good to see you. Richard, Adrian's voice was cool. This is Clara Bennett. Clara, my uncle Richard Hale. Richard's eyes swept over Clara with the kind of assessment that made her skin crawl. Miss Bennett, how do you know my nephew? I work for Hale International, Clara said, keeping her voice steady. Ah, an employee. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. How modern, Clara also saved us from a costly mistake in Lisbon, Adrian said, his hand tightening slightly on Clara's waist. She's brilliant at what she does. I'm sure she is. Richard's tone suggested he thought the opposite. Adrian, we should discuss the quarterly projections before the evening gets away from us. Later, Adrian said firmly. I'm here with Clara tonight. Richard's expression hardened, but he nodded and moved away, leaving Clara feeling like she'd just survived the first round of a fight she hadn't signed up for. That went well, she muttered. That's Richard being polite. Wait until you meet my cousin Margaret. Margaret turned out to be a rail-thin woman in her 40s with perfect posture and a voice like cut glass. She cornered them at the bar 10 minutes later. Adrian, darling, I heard you brought a guest. Her eyes landed on Clara. How unexpected. Margaret, this is Clara Bennett. Charming. Margaret's smile was sharp. And what is it you do, dear? I'm an assistant at Hale International. An assistant? How quaint. Margaret turned to Adrian. Daddy would be so pleased to know you're fraternizing with the help. Adrian's jaw tightened. Margaret, Oh, don't be sensitive. I'm just making an observation. She sipped her champagne delicately. Though I do wonder what the board will think. They're already concerned about your judgment after that messy situation in Singapore. My judgment is fine. Is it? Because bringing your secretary to a charity gala sends a certain message, doesn't it? Clara felt her face burning. Before she could respond, Adrian stepped between them. Clara is not my secretary, she's my girlfriend. And if you or anyone else in this family has a problem with that, you're welcome to leave. Margaret's eyes widened. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything. Adrian, think about what you're saying. The company, your reputation, are not more important than her. Adrian's voice was steel. Now, if you'll excuse us, I'd like to dance with my girlfriend. He took Clara's hand and led her to the dance floor before Margaret could respond. Clara was shaking. Your family hates me. My family is full of snobs who think money equals worth. They're wrong. Adrian pulled her close as the music started. Dance with me. Forget about them. I don't know if I can do this, Adrian. Your cousin just called me the help to my face. I know. And I'm sorry. He looked at her with something that might have been regret. I should have warned you they'd be like this. I should have prepared you better. You can't prepare someone for being treated like they're not good enough. You are good enough. You're better than all of them combined. Clara wanted to believe him, but as they danced, she could feel eyes on them. People whispering, judging, already forming opinions about the poor girl who'd somehow landed a billionaire. Halfway through the song, a woman's voice cut through the music like a knife. Well, well, Adrian Hale with a date. I never thought I'd see the day. Clara turned to see a stunning woman in a silver gown approaching them, tall, elegant, with the kind of beauty that came from good genes and expensive maintenance. Adrian's entire body went rigid. Victoria. So this was Victoria Lang, the ex-fiancée who dumped him at his mother's funeral. Victoria smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. It's been a long time. You look well. What are you doing here? I'm on the planning committee. Didn't you know? Her gaze shifted to Clara. And who is this? Clara Bennett, Claire said before Adrian could answer. How lovely. And how did you two meet? I work for Adrian. Victoria's smile widened. How convenient. Adrian always did prefer to keep things close. Less chance of emotional complications that way. Victoria. Adrian's voice was a warning. What? I'm just making conversation. She looked at Clara with mock sympathy. Has he told you about his little habit of pushing people away the moment things get difficult? Or are you still in the honeymoon phase where you think you're different? That's enough, Adrian said. I'm just trying to help. Someone should warn her that Adrian Hale doesn't do relationships. He does transactions. Everything with him is a calculation. How much can he control? How much can he contain? The moment you become too real, too messy, he'll shut you out completely. Clara felt like she'd been slapped, because some part of what Victoria was saying rang true. Adrian did control things. He did keep people at a distance. You don't know what you're talking about, Adrian said, but his voice lacked conviction. Don't I? Tell me, Adrian, have you actually told this poor girl you love her? Or are you still hedging your bets, keeping one foot out the door in case it gets too hard? Adrian didn't answer. The silence stretched too long. Clara pulled away from him, her chest tight. I need some air. Clara! She walked away before he could stop her, pushing through the crowd and out onto a terrace that overlooked the park. The cool air hit her face, and she realized she was crying. She'd been so stupid, thinking this could work, thinking she could belong in this world. Victoria was right. Adrian was terrified of losing people, so he kept everyone at arm's length, including her. Miss Bennett? Clara turned to find Daniel standing in the doorway, concern on his face. Are you okay? I'm fine. You're clearly not fine. He came to stand beside her. I saw what happened with Victoria. She's always been vicious. She was also right. About what? About Adrian pushing people away. About him keeping one foot out the door. Clara wiped at her eyes angrily. I knew this was a mistake. I knew it from the beginning. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said something unexpected. Do you know why I've worked for Adrian for 6 years? Clara shook her head. Because underneath all that control and distance, he's one of the most loyal people I've ever met. When my mom got sick 2 years ago, Adrian gave me unlimited time off and paid her medical bills without me asking. When Vanessa's marriage fell apart, he personally handled her divorce lawyer fees. He doesn't broadcast these things because he doesn't want credit. He just does them because he cares. That doesn't mean he cares about me the same way. No, he cares about you more. Daniel smiled slightly. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Not even Catherine, if I'm being honest. With you, he's different, less guarded, more human. But Victoria said, Victoria is bitter because Adrian chose grief over her. She took it personally when really, Adrian was just trying to survive. Daniel turned to face her fully. But he's not surviving anymore. He's living. And that's because of you. Before Clara could respond, Adrian appeared in the doorway. Can I talk to you? He asked quietly. Daniel squeezed Clara's shoulder and disappeared back inside, leaving them alone on the terrace. Adrian walked over slowly like he was approaching something fragile that might shatter. I'm sorry, he said. For what? For not defending you better. For letting Victoria get in your head. For... He stopped, running his hand through his hair in frustration. For making you doubt this. Doubt us. Did you mean what you said earlier about me being your girlfriend? Yes. Because sometimes it feels like you're keeping me at a distance, like you're waiting for me to leave so you don't have to risk getting hurt. Adrian looked away, his jaw tight. You're not wrong. The honesty hurt worse than a lie would have. I'm terrified, Clara. Every single day. I wake up and think about all the ways this could fall apart. All the ways I could lose you. He turned back to her, and there were tears in his eyes. After Catherine died, I promised myself I'd never feel that kind of pain again. And then you walked into my life and broke every wall I'd built. So what are we doing? Are we together, or are we just circling each other until one of us gets scared enough to run? I don't want to run. But you are running. You're running by not letting yourself fully be here, by keeping part of yourself locked away where I can't reach it. Adrian stepped closer. What do you want from me? I want you to stop being afraid. I want you to trust that I'm not going to leave. I want... Clara's voice broke. I want you to love me enough to take the risk. I do love you. The words hung in the air between them, huge and terrifying and real. Clara's breath caught. What? I love you, Adrian said again, stronger this time. I'm in love with you. I have been since Lisbon, maybe even before, and it scares me more than anything I've ever felt, but it's true. Adrian, I know I'm not good at this. I know I keep my distance and control too much and push people away when I should pull them closer, but I'm trying, Clara. I'm trying to be better, for you, for us. Clara felt tears streaming down her face. I love you too, you idiot, but loving each other isn't enough if we can't figure out how to actually be together. Then tell me how. Tell me what you need. I need you to stop making decisions for me. I need you to stop trying to protect me from your world by controlling every interaction. I need you to trust me enough to fight my own battles. Even when those battles are with my family? Especially then. Because if we're going to make this work, they need to see that I'm not going anywhere, that you chose me and you meant it. Adrian cupped her face in his hands. I do mean it. I choose you, Clara. Over my family's approval, over the board's opinions, over everything. Then prove it. How? Clara took a deep breath. Walk back in there with me. Let them see us together. And if anyone else tries to make me feel small, you back me up. Not by fighting my battles for me, but by standing beside me while I fight them myself. Something shifted in Adrian's expression. Understanding, maybe. Or respect. Okay, he said softly. Let's go. They walked back into the ballroom hand in hand, and Clara felt the stares immediately. But this time, instead of shrinking away, she held her head high. Richard approached them almost immediately, his expression tight with disapproval. Adrian, we need to discuss this situation. There's nothing to discuss, Adrian said calmly. Clara is my girlfriend. That's not changing. The board is concerned about the optics. Then the board can be concerned. I'm not interested in their opinion on my personal life. You're being reckless. This girl is clearly using you for your money. Clara stepped forward before Adrian could respond. Mr. Hale, I understand you're concerned about your nephew, but I'm not using anyone. I'm here because I care about Adrian, and while I appreciate that you want to protect him, I'm not the threat you think I am. Richard looked startled. Young lady, I grew up in Queens. I work hard for everything I have. I don't need Adrian's money, and I don't want it. What I want is a relationship with a man I love. If that's a problem for you or the board, then you're welcome to take it up with Adrian directly. But don't assume you know anything about me based on where I come from. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Richard did something unexpected. He laughed. Well, he said, looking at Adrian with something that might have been approval. She's got spine. I'll give her that. She's got a lot more than spine, Adrian said quietly. Richard studied them both for a long moment. Fine. Bring her to the next board meeting. Let's see if she can handle the wolves. He walked away, and Clara let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. That went better than expected, she said. You were incredible. I was terrified. You didn't show it? Adrian pulled her close. Thank you. For what? For fighting. For not letting them intimidate you. He kissed her forehead. For being brave enough to stand beside me instead of behind me. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Clara met more of Adrian's family, endured more subtle insults and invasive questions, but she handled each one with the same quiet dignity she'd shown Richard. And Adrian stood beside her through all of it, not hovering, not controlling, just being present. By the time they left, Clara was exhausted but also strangely exhilarated. They'd survived, together. In the car ride back to Queens, Adrian held her hand and didn't say much, but the silence was comfortable, like they'd crossed some invisible line and come out the other side stronger. When they pulled up to her building, Adrian walked her to the door like this was a normal date instead of the most intense evening of Clara's life. Can I see you tomorrow? He asked. I'd like that. Bring your grandmother. I want her to meet Lily properly. Clara's eyes widened. Are you sure? I'm sure. You were right earlier. We can't keep our worlds separate. We have to build something new, together. That's going to be messy. Probably, but I'm willing to try if you are. Clara kissed him, soft and sure and full of promise. I'm willing to try. The next morning, Clara woke to sunlight streaming through her window and a text from Adrian. Lily wants to make pancakes for your grandmother. Please say yes. I have no idea how to make pancakes without burning them. Clara smiled and showed the message to Rosa, who laughed. Tell him we'll be there at 10, and tell him to buy extra syrup. I like my pancakes sweet. They arrived at Adrian's penthouse at exactly 10 o'clock, and Lily met them at the door wearing an apron covered in flour. Miss Rosa, we're making pancakes. Well, Daddy's trying, but he's bad at it, so Maria's actually making them. Rosa laughed and let Lily pull her into the kitchen, leaving Clara and Adrian alone in the foyer. Your daughter is wonderful, Clara said. She gets it from her mother. They joined the others in the kitchen, where Maria was indeed making pancakes, while Adrian pretended to help, and Lily narrated every step with elaborate enthusiasm. Rosa sat at the island, taking it all in with sharp eyes that missed nothing. After breakfast, Lily dragged Rosa to her room to show her the fish tank, and Clara helped Adrian clean up. Your grandmother is terrifying, he said quietly. She likes you. How can you tell? She hasn't told you to stop wasting her granddaughter's time. That's approval in Rosa language. Adrian smiled and pulled Clara close. kissing her softly. I meant what I said last night. I love you. I love you too. Even though I'm emotionally unavailable and controlling? Even though I figure we can work on those things together. That's very generous of you. I'm a generous person. From Lily's room, they heard Rosa's laughter and Lily's excited chatter about Steve the goldfish. This is nice, Adrian said quietly. Having everyone here, it feels like family, Clara finished. Yeah, like family. The next few weeks were an adjustment. Clara still lived in Queens with her grandmother, but she spent more time at Adrian's penthouse. Rosa and Lily formed an unlikely friendship based on their shared love of telenovelas and their mutual agreement that Adrian needed to loosen up. The media eventually found out about Clara, and the articles were exactly as invasive and awful as Adrian had warned. But Clara learned to ignore them, focusing instead on the life they were building together. The board meeting Richard had mentioned turned out to be less dramatic than expected. Clara presented the research she'd done on market expansion opportunities, and while some members were clearly skeptical, others seemed genuinely impressed. Vanessa pulled her aside afterward. You held your own in there. That's rare. Thanks. For what it's worth, I think you're good for him. He's been different since Lisbon, less robotic. Vanessa almost smiled. Don't break his heart. He's already been through enough. I won't. Good. Because if you do, the board isn't what you'll have to worry about. I'll make your life hell personally. Clara laughed, and they parted on surprisingly good terms. That night, Adrian took her to the Brooklyn restaurant where they'd had their first real date. Nonna Rosa was thrilled to see them, immediately bringing wine and bread and treating them like honored guests. Over pasta and candlelight, Adrian reached across the table and took Clara's hand. I've been thinking, he said. That's usually dangerous. I'm serious. I've been thinking about what you said, about building a new life together instead of trying to fit into each other's worlds. Okay. What if we actually did that? What if we found a place that's ours? Not the penthouse, not your apartment in Queens, something in between. Clara's heart stuttered. Adrian, I'm not asking you to move in with me tomorrow. I'm thinking ahead to what this could be if we keep trying. What do you see when you think ahead? Adrian was quiet for a moment. I see Sunday mornings with you and Lily and Rosa. I see you calling me out when I'm being too controlling. I see us fighting and making up and figuring out how to make this work even when it's hard. He squeezed her hand. I see a life that's messy and real and better than anything I've had before. Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes. That sounds perfect. It won't be perfect. We're both too stubborn and scared for perfect. Then it sounds real. And real is better anyway. 6 months later, Clara stood in their new apartment, a spacious place in Brooklyn that was closer to Adrian's office, but still connected to the neighborhood where he'd grown up. It had enough room for Lily and a guest room for Rosa when she stayed over, and windows that let in light that felt like hope. She'd been promoted at Hale International, given her own projects to manage. The board had slowly accepted her presence, though some members still looked at her like she was a curiosity they couldn't quite understand. Adrian had learned to loosen his grip on control, to let Clara fight her own battles, to trust that she wasn't going anywhere. They still fought sometimes. About work, about boundaries, about whose turn it was to deal with Lily's increasingly creative excuses for why she didn't want to go to bed. But they figured it out. Together. That evening, Clara was making dinner, actual dinner, not cereal, when Adrian came home early with Lily. Guess what? Lily said, bouncing with excitement. Daddy said we can get a dog. Clara looked at Adrian. Did he now? Don't look at me like that. She wore me down. You're supposed to be the disciplinarian. Have you met our daughter? She's relentless. She gets it from you. Lily tugged on Clara's sleeve. Can we name it Sparkle too? Since we already have a fish named Sparkle? We can discuss names after we actually get a dog. But Miss Clara, your dad and I need to talk about this first, sweetheart. Lily pouted but accepted defeat, running off to her room to draw pictures of what their hypothetical dog might look like. Adrian wrapped his arms around Clara from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. Did she really wear you down, or did you already decide we were getting a dog? Little bit of both. Clara turned in his arms. You're getting soft in your old age. I'm 32, that's not old. You act like you're 80 sometimes. Lily says the same thing. Adrian kissed her softly. Thank you. For what? For this, for us, for making me believe I could have a real family again. Clara cupped his face in her hands. You always had a real family. You just needed to let yourself see it. That night, after Lily was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Clara and Adrian sat on their balcony overlooking Brooklyn. The city glowed around them, full of noise and life and endless possibility. Do you ever regret it? Adrian asked. Giving up your old life for this? Clara thought about her tiny apartment in Queens, about the struggles and the worry and the constant fear of not having enough. She thought about how hard she'd fought to get here, how many times she'd almost walked away. I didn't give up my old life, she said finally. I just made room for a new one. There's a difference. What's the difference? The difference is I am still me. I still eat cereal sometimes. I still worry about my grandmother. I still think your family is ridiculous and the board is full of pompous jerks. She leaned against him. But now I also have you and Lily and this life we're building that's ours. Adrian pulled her closer. I love you. I love you too. Even when you're being emotionally unavailable. I'm working on that. I know. You're getting better. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city breathe around them. Clara Bennett had started this journey as a struggling office assistant from Queens who'd accidentally insulted a billionaire in his own chair. She'd been terrified of not belonging, of not being enough, of loving someone whose world felt impossibly distant from her own. But she'd learned something important along the way. Love wasn't about one person giving up everything to fit into another person's life. It was about two people being brave enough to build something new together, something that honored where they came from while making space for where they wanted to go. It was messy, it was complicated, it was hard work every single day, but it was also real, and real was always better than perfect. Adrian Hale had spent 3 years hiding from anything that felt genuine because he was terrified of losing it. He'd built walls so high he'd forgotten what it felt like to be human. But Clara had reminded him, not by being perfect or by fixing him, but by being honest enough to call him out when he was wrong and patient enough to wait while he figured out how to be better. Together, they'd learned that love wasn't about control or protection or keeping people at arm's length. It was about standing beside someone and trusting them to stand beside you. It was about being vulnerable enough to say, I'm scared, and brave enough to try anyway. The next morning, Lily burst into their room at 6 a.m. with drawings of 17 different dog breeds and a detailed argument for why they needed a golden retriever named Captain Sparklepants. Adrian groaned, Clara laughed, and somehow that felt exactly right. Because this was their life now, messy and loud and full of a 5-year-old's endless energy and a goldfish named Steve, and breakfast debates about whether Captain Sparklepants was actually a good name for a dog. It was nothing like the perfectly controlled existence Adrian had built after losing Catherine. It was nothing like the struggling, scraping by life Clara had known in Queens. It was something entirely new, something they'd created together, and it was more than enough.